Right, now I can talk. So as I explain the whole principle this morning, it will help you understand some of those scriptures that we've read out, that to a lot of people don't make any sense, and they don't unless you understand the context that they've been written in and what they mean and how they fit in. So, is Yahveh a kinsman redeemer? He says he is. He says, I'm going to redeem Israel. Is Boaz a kinsman redeemer? He says so. Is Yeshua a kinsman redeemer? Absolutely. But today we'll talk about them as Goel. Goel is a Hebrew word that literally means kinsman redeemer. But kinsman is not a word that's used in Hebrew. Kinsman is an English word. It was a Catholic word, and it was short for kingsman, kingsman. And it was given to those that danced around the maypole. They used to dance around the maypole every year, which is a pagan fertility festival. I've got bad news for you. A maypole is a phallic symbol. That's what it is. That's like most trees. That's what most trees are. That's why so many different races worship trees, including Christmas trees. You can put the stones back in your pocket, wait till later. But yeah, that's what it is. And they used to dance around the maypole, and particularly in parts of Europe. It's not just the UK, but all over Europe you find the whole maypole ceremony, different times of the year. Some of them just stay up all year. But the kingsmen were the ones that were in charge of the whole procedure. So that was why that word was used in the King James. But Goel literally means redeemer. So Noach was a man who was righteous and wholehearted. How could he be righteous and wholehearted? Had he been saved? Was he full of the Ruach? But it says he was. It says he walked with Yahveh. Who else walked with Yahveh? Adam in the garden. He walked with him. What he's saying is there was a relationship. He spent time with him, and they walked and they talked. And more importantly, Noach listened. Lots of people want to walk, not many of them want to listen. It's a two-way conversation. And he establishes a covenant with him to never again destroy all living beings. And as long as the earth and time exists, remember that time was created in Genesis, and the planets were created to govern time, the sun and the moon and the stars. Sowing time, harvest time, cold, heat, summer, winter, day and night will never cease. It's a covenant promise that no human or spiritual being can change or sabotage. Because Yahveh has redeemed mankind and all living things. He says so in His Word. So what did He do? He saved a remnant. And He always saves a remnant. The seed. But this remnant, what people forget, experienced an absolute catastrophic ending. And what they learned from that was that after an ending, always comes a new beginning. So part of my message today is do not despair when you experience an ending. Because it always comes with a new beginning. Don't become discouraged. Don't give up. Because out of it will come a new day. A new beginning as promised in the covenant. And you've all seen all these American movies where the aliens come and destroy it all, and then right at the end they beat them all. And suddenly you see this beautiful bright sky comes, and they all laugh and they all hug each other, and this is the start of a new thing, and we'll repopulate and we'll rebuild. It's like that. So Naomi experienced this exact principle when her husband died, along with her two sons. For her, Life seemed to be over. It was a spiritual and physical catastrophe for her. And it was a time of famine. So when things get going tough, the tough go home. She went home to Bethlehem, the house of bread, with no hope, no future. But one of her two daughters-in-law, Ruth, shocked and surprised her by insisting on going with her. As a Moabitess, a Gentile, she wanted a new beginning, stating, "Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." She absolutely refused to just curl up in a ball of anger and bitterness and give up. So she freely chose to enter into a covenant relationship with Yahveh and Naomi. This is a woman who'd lost her son and her father-in-law, and yet she still trusted him enough to enter into a covenant relationship with him and go somewhere she'd never been before. Why? Probably because she trusted Naomi. And as a result of her trusting and faithfulness, she met her Goel, her kinsman redeemer, Boaz, in Bethlehem. When? At the time of the barley harvest, at the time of Pesach. And they had a child, Oved, who was King David's grandfather. Following 28 generations later, 42 from Noach in Bethlehem, at Sukkot by Yeshua HaMashiach. So because she was faithful, she became part of the line of Yeshua. 42 generations from Noah. And she discovered her own personal Hag Goel, the kinsman redeemer, who was born at Sukkot in a sukkah. So Yeshua is our own personal Hag Goel. He's our own personal kinsman redeemer, who was born at Sukkot in a sukkah to redeem us from spiritual slavery. He brought light out of darkness and hope out of despair, new beginnings out of tragic endings, and a harvest out of hard, seemingly impenetrable, barren, lifeless sea and land. So, what's a Goel? A kinsman redeemer. And what possible significance does he have for us as Messianic believers? Well, the four criteria for Goel, or kinsman redeemers, that were established in Vayikra or Leviticus are that 1, he must be related to us. 2, he must be able and qualified. 3, he must be willing, he must do it out of free choice. And 4, they must pay the price of the redemption in full, whatever the debt is. As a Goel, from the word galal, to redeem, the responsibility of a Goel includes the duty to redeem relatives from slavery, if the latter has been obliged to sell themselves to another. Every one of us sold ourselves to another before we were redeemed, and the price to redeem us has been paid in full. Also to repurchase the property of a relative who had to sell it because of poverty, and also to avenge the blood of his relatives, and to marry his brother's widow in order to provide a son and heir for his brother, in case the brother had not got any sons to pass his name on to. And we know in this situation that's exactly what it was like. But also he's to finally receive restitution on behalf of an injured relative who has died. As I say, the kinsman part is an English edition, means the king's man, a role carried out during the maypole or Mary's pole by Morris men or Mary's men who danced at the festival. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. It's not Morris' men, it's Mary's men, and it wasn't the maypole, it was Mary's pole, and it fitted in with the fact that that was the time of year that they did it. So Vayikra, Leviticus 25, 48 and 49, gives the criteria for the nearest relative to be considered the official Goel, who was tasked with redeeming a slave, starting with a brother, an uncle, a male cousin, and then any other relative. And the same order was probably observed in the other cases as well, except for one. Only the brother could marry the sister-in-law. Jewish tradition has also ascribed extra responsibilities to the blood avenger or the Goel. That role has been performed in modern times through the Jewish community by what is now called the prosecuting attorney in the Beit Din, or the place where judgment took place. In the synagogue system, the prosecuting relative's job was to present the facts and then plead on behalf of the victim in a criminal case, which made him responsible for bringing the offender to justice, to find the evidence against him, to present the case to the court and claim restitution from the offender. And it was also his task to argue against any attempt to pardon the sinner. So this is where we get our modern prosecuting attorney from. Our Abba, our Father, is Yahveh, who created and fashioned both man and woman in his own likeness, his own image. And we're not talking about a physical looking in the mirror thing. It was his character that he passed on to us. His own character. And then he breathed his life into us, the Ruach. Therefore, every single one of us are brothers and sisters of Yeshua. Full blood relatives. Fully meeting all of the criteria to be redeemed by him from our slavery to sin. How? By paying all of our debts in full, and at the same time bringing us back into our Father's household. He was certainly able, he was certainly qualified, he was certainly willing, and he certainly paid the full price in full at Golgotha. Our kinsman redeemer, because of Ruth and King David, was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread. He went in and out of Egypt as a baby, was acknowledged by stargazing Eastern kings and scholars, and those who'd studied all of the prophecies. They all knew that the Messiah was going to come out of Bethlehem. How's that going to happen now for the people that don't believe he's come? It's an Arab town. Only one person fulfills all the prophecy. So they studied all the prophecies in Torah in Matthew 2, 3 and 6. So it was and still is absolutely incontrovertible and obvious to any Torah scholar who's honest enough and willing enough and bold enough to acknowledge the truth of who he really was and is and will continue to be, Mashiach. Any Torah scholar who's actually honest cannot fail to understand that he was Messiah. It's impossible to make a mistake. There's just too much evidence there. If you took that into a courtroom, just as his first coming was prophesied and fulfilled, completely obvious with all the signs in the sky, the star, so will his second coming. The first time people were divided over who he was and where he came from. They thought they'd found a loophole. Doesn't the Tanakh say the Messiah is from the seed of David and comes from Bethlehem? So how can the Messiah come from the Galilee? They conveniently ignored the fact that he didn't come from the Galilee. That's just where he was living. Where do you come from? The place you were born. You might live in many, many places, but that's not where you come from. That's just where you happen to be living at the time.
Even in your passport, this is where you were born.
Yeah. The second time there will be no confusion or division, because he's going to come straight from heaven this time, and he'll come directly to Jerusalem. He'll come straight from the throne room. No donkeys this time. He'll be coming as the King of Kings, and he'll be leading heaven's armies, and he'll be riding a white horse. And he'll be announced with shofars louder than any thunder, announcing his arrival back to earth. And people from the east to the west will see the sky lit up for the whole earth to see him. But at the same time mourn as they recognise him and acknowledge on bended knees that they've rejected him. Every tribe, every people group, every religious entity and world leader will also bow the knee. And they'll either confess with the tongue that he was, he is, and always be who he says he is, or as any slaves had the right to do, they will nail their ears to the doorpost of the house that they've been in bondage to, which is Satan's house, and choose to stay on as voluntary slaves in it, thereby rejecting and renouncing their birthright through him at the cost of their eternal lives. And I've taught on it before. Any slave, even though they've been set free, had a choice to go to the doorpost of the house that they were in, and they would nail a piece of wood through the ear and to the doorpost, and that would be a sign that they were voluntarily staying on as servants in that house. They weren't slaves anymore. They'd paid the price, but they stayed on as servants. And a lot of people will choose to stay as slaves in Satan's house. They'll still have to acknowledge with their tongue who he is, but whether they want to be in a relationship with him or not is their choice. And sadly, a lot of people will make the wrong choice. They'll renounce their birthright for a pot of red stuff. And it will cost them their eternal lives. But aren't we saved? Anybody can save someone. I can go on the beach right now and save somebody from drowning. I can do it over and over again. I can save somebody from poverty or danger. But it doesn't require a relationship to do that. Just because I feel sorry for somebody and save them doesn't mean I want an ongoing relationship with them or even have one. I could be anybody. Just happen to be on the beach at that time. But redemption is a once only and permanent transaction. You can be saved over and over again by a multitude of different people, but you can only be redeemed by a kinsman redeemer. You can only be redeemed by a relative, somebody that is in relationship with you. It involves this close relative who will wipe out our debts and take us back into his household, his father's household. And he's the only one that can do it, because a slave can't redeem another slave. In the system, slaves couldn't redeem slaves. A, they weren't free. B, they didn't have the resources. Only somebody who was free and had the resources to do it could redeem a relative. And because a slave can't redeem another slave, it rules out the rest of mankind. Because there's not a single person among mankind who has that qualification. Only Yeshua. Why? Because of the virtue of his birth, which was sinless, his life, which was sinless, his freedom from debt, and his bloodline connection with us, and with Yahveh. Therefore he can and does fulfill all of the criteria of a kinsman redeemer. And there's nobody that he has to go and ask, because they're first in line in front of him. He is first in line. He can and does fulfill all of the criteria to redeem us. And at Har-Megiddo, or you'd known it as Armageddon, he will fill the last part of his role as the blood avenger. So Baruch haba b'Shem Yahveh. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahveh. Shalom, mishpacha, family. Shalom.